Hello, this is Dom Magwillie. Because we're viewing Lane Nishikawa's film, Only the Brave, I'd like to talk a little about World War II and the participation of Japanese Americans, specifically in the 100th Battalion and the 442nd Combat Team. We will begin where it all began for Japanese Americans at this time, December 7th, 1941. While Japanese Americans on the West Coast were evacuated, relocated, and incarcerated, in Hawaii it was different. Martial law followed. The 160,000 Hawaiian Japanese Americans were viewed with fear and suspicion. 2 months after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Delos Emmons, commanding general of the Army in Hawaii, discharged all Japanese Americans from the Hawaiian Territorial Guard. But many voices fought to retain them in service, and the decision was reversed. On May 26, 1942, General George Marshall issued orders establishing the Hawaiian Provisional Battalion, and some 1,300 men and 29 officers were sent to the mainland for combat training. On June 10, 1942, they landed in Oakland, California, and were activated as the 100th Infantry Battalion. They were called the 1 Puka Puka. Puka means hole in Hawaiian. The 100th trained at Camp Shelby, Mississippi. 9 months after the 100th activation, President Roosevelt reopened military service for Japanese American volunteers. About a year later, in February 1943, the 442nd Combat Team was activated. That meant volunteers from the camps could enlist. Meanwhile, the 100th was shipped out across the Atlantic. On September 2nd, they landed in North Africa, joining the 34th Red Bull Division, and went to Italy. The 100th fought from Salerno to Cassino, Anzio, and finally to Rome. On June 2nd, 1944, the 442nd had landed in Europe and was headed to Naples. There they joined the Red Bull Division, and the 442nd added the 100th Battalion to their ranks. This brings us to when the movie Only the Brave begins, when both Hawaiians and mainlanders were fighting together. Some points to note. First, while they were training at Camp Shelby, the 100th, the Japanese Americans from Hawaii, and the 442nd soldiers didn't get along. There were some reasons for this. Cultural difference. Hawaiian boys called themselves Buddha heads. They called the Niseis katonks. Katonk is the sound a coconut makes when you hit it. Hawaiians were expansive, vocal personalities who came from an environment where they were the majority. Nisei were careful and rigid. They came from a world where they were a minority. Economic differences. Hawaiians still had their homes and their families still had jobs. When the Buddha heads got paid, they could spend. The Nisei came out of the camps. They had lost everything. Their army pay went to their families. So Nisei had a reputation of being stingy. There were also issues of dialect. The Hawaiian pidgin was sometimes unintelligible. Ua, what's the matter? Bariu? Many Nisei had been to college. Their language could be considered proper. The Hawaiians were quick to take offense if a mainlander mocked how they talked. The hostility became so intense that the whole experiment of using Japanese Americans in the war was in question, until Hawaiian soldiers were sent out to visit a Japanese internment camp. Here's Senator Dan Inouye and other members of the 100th talking about that time. Take a look at this.
All of a sudden, each company in the regiment began receiving invitations from Jerome and Roa, Arkansas. So here we are with our ukuleles and guitars, if you can picture that. And we're singing all the way from Mississippi to Arkansas. But when we got closer and we turned into it, then we began to realize what was happening.
You see all the buildings, but around the building, huge, tall barbed wire fence. And you know, they had guard tower with machine guns facing toward the camp.
The men who were manning the guns were Caucasian men. They had rifles with bayonets, And here we were with ukuleles. But then we trooped in, and there you could see men and women and children of Japanese ancestry.
The residents of these camps had spent 2 weeks of their ration to make okazu and food for the boys. So they said, wow, I mean, they spent 2 weeks of their ration. Wow, how terrible.
We tried our best to be happy, but how can you be happy in those circumstances?
As they met some of the boys' parents, the guy that he just licked and had a fight with, they came back very somber and very, very quiet in the bus. They weren't playing the ukulele and singing songs.
And I believe that what was running through the minds of most, if not all, was a question, would I have volunteered from that camp?
After seeing that, I felt, boy, they went through more than we did. Like we were free as a bird from Hawaii. None of this prejudice, none of this camp deal.
Then what happened is the cadre and the Hawaiians and everything meshed together. The esprit de corps completely changed. Instead of being animosity among them, it was complete friendship. The team was being built. The team that really became famous was being built because of that. And that's what happened with the 442.
This is Dom Agwillie. More later.